Good evening. I'd like to call to order the March 5th meeting of the Titusville Planning and Zoning Commission. Everyone stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Lori.
Chairman Aton,
Here.
Vice Chairman Childs,
Here.
Secretary Grant,
Here.
Member Faison,
Here.
Member Garrod,
Here.
Member Scully,
Here.
Member Gellin, here, Alternate Member Findler, Alternate Member Rogers.
All right, we have a quorum. Did anyone have any revisions or changes to the minutes?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Page 8. It has Chairman Richardson as voting yes on there. I think we should probably change
Fix
that. I think it's accurate. I think the subject is accurate, and I think the votes are accurate. I didn't watch the video to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure everything else is correct.
You're pretty sure he wasn't here, too. All right. Anyone else? Mr. Roderick? Roderick?
I actually thought that this had been left out, but then I found it right at the very end. I'd already written it down, but at the very end of the minutes, it was said that I had hoped. I thought that maybe we hadn't handled Mr. Daco's issue quite as expeditiously as we might have. And I said, it says here on page 8, Member Rogers commented that he feels local government did not function smoothly with regards to Mr. Daco's request and hopes that it would run more smoothly for these types of regional requests in the future. That is certainly true, and I suppose that does cover what I said. But I guess to clarify a little bit, I guess I might have hoped to have said more clearly, or for this to say more clearly, that when a citizen says, look, the ground truth or the reality on the ground is not what your documents are showing, take a chance with the citizen. And I don't know whether we made it or didn't make it out there, whether an inspector or a code enforcement officer made it or didn't make it out there, because Mr. Daco said he wasn't quite sure whether the person came when he wasn't there. But if there is some discrepancy about how the reality on the ground is versus the reality or what you see on a chart, I would hope that we would check that out expeditiously. And the other thing was on page 7, yeah, I know. Okay, sorry, it stopped working.
His light's on, but it's dead, and he's not on my screen either.
It is lights on, but
He's
nobody's
back.
home.
Now he's.
Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Regarding the clarification on FLU policy 1.9.1, I just wanted to reiterate that I think we should only recategorize roads every 7 years. As always, in the evaluation and appraisal report, the EAR, instead of on the fly or as a kind of a rolling, change, due to the impact of such classifications on area development and the possibility, in fact, possibly the likelihood of such changes to be influenced by political considerations and other pressures. So I did say that in the meeting, and I wanted to make sure that that was reflected.
So you'd like that added to the meeting minutes?
I would. The other, I suppose, has been covered probably sufficiently, but I really wanted to be on the record as having asked for, this type of reclassification of roads only happening with your standard EAR with a standard schedule of every 7 years. I don't trust an as-you-go process to not be influenced.
On the page 8 clarification, do we have what we need, or do we need a suggested modification or anything to that?
When you get your motion to approve the minutes, you would add that modification if the board agrees?
Well, Member Rogers, do you have a suggested?
Member Rogers, I don't think is an acting regular member to make a motion tonight. He can participate in discussions as an alternate member, but I do see 7 regular members up on the dais.
No, I understand. It's just he wanted a clarification on his statement, and
So I suppose that if there is anything to be added to 8, just the key point was that you had a resident who seems rightly said that the facts on the ground were not the facts on the paper. And I just, I hope that that would always be checked, as quickly as possible in the future. And perhaps it was, but I would just hope that it would be. And then the other thing was on page 7. I just wanted to add that I want to be on record as having asked for the road reclassification to only happen with the standard EAR schedule every 7 years.
okay. Does anyone care to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes with the correction of page 8 for who voted. Removing Chairman Rich and replacing that with Chairman Aton. And then to clarify Member Rogers' statement on page 7 about EAR every 7 years. And I'm not sure about page 8, but what clarifies statements, I guess, on 7. Is that good?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any comments? All right. Maybe we should do a roll call on this, Lori.
Okay. Member Faison,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Childs,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Gallen,
Yes.
Member Scully,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Chairman Aton.
Yes. All right. City Attorney, do you want to read the quasi-judicial procedures?
Good evening. Tonight's agenda provides the following notice. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. The meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in resolution number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is petitions and requests from the public present. You do not need to have filled out a card if you want to speak on anything that's not directly addressed on the agenda tonight. Just come forward. Anyone? All right. I see nothing under old business. First item, Eddie, is Small Scale Comprehensive Plan Amendment, SSA number 8-2024-1717.
Good evening. Christy Anderson, Senior Planner. This is for Small Scale Comprehensive Plan Amendment, SSA 8-2024, located at 1717 Barna Avenue, known as the Royal Manor Townhomes. The applicant, Mr. Rodney Honeycutt of Honeycutt and Associates Incorporated, on behalf of owners Ken and Carlene Miller, is requesting a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment with rezoning and concept plan on approximately 5.74 acres of land located near the northeast corner of the intersection of Barna Avenue and Day Street for the purposes of constructing a multifamily residential townhome development. The request intends to change the current future land use from the current low-density residential to the medium-density residential and rezone the property from single-family medium-density R1B to multifamily high-density residential R3 to support the intended townhome development. On December 4th, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended a motion to deny the future land use map amendment. The motion to deny passed with a 5 yes, 2 no vote. The denial was based on future land use element policy 1.1.4, which states that the city shall not introduce, approve, or allow other land uses in an area where single-family land uses are the predominant land use of the area, unless the proposed new land use is consistent with the redevelopment plan or formal study adopted by City Council. The Planning and Zoning Commission made a motion to deny the rezoning because it does not comply with the future land use. The motion to deny passed with a 7-0 vote. The developer did distribute a new concept plan at the January 14th, 2025 City Council meeting, which reduced the number of units from 43 to a maximum of 32. The updated concept plan has been provided on page 12 of your packets. Council at that time made a motion to send this item back to Planning and Zoning Commission for reconsideration. This item was re-advertised and re-noticed. Regarding this application, the staff has found that the comprehensive future land use map amendment is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The medium-density residential land use is compatible with the surrounding residential land uses and is adjacent to a collector roadway. The future land use zoning consistency matrix contained within the Land Development Regulations, Chapter 27, Article 3, Section 27-21, does not list the R3 zoning as consistent under the medium-density residential land use category. The R2 zoning was found to be more compatible with the surrounding area. The updated concept provided to you is consistent with the R2 zoning district with the exception of Note 5, which indicates that the proposed townhomes will have a lower floor footprint of 20 to 24 feet in width. This notation will need to be revised to a minimum width of 24 feet in order to comply with the minimum lot width requirement of the recommended R2 zoning district. The approval of the R3 zoning district would effectively have a maximum density of 10 dwelling units per acre. The R3 would allow townhome lots to be 20 feet wide and 2,000 square feet. The updated concept plan does limit the development to a maximum of 32 units, 32 units per acre, 32 units with 5.6 units per acre. Staff recommends approval of SSA number 8-2024 to amend the future land use map by changing the future land use designation from low-density residential to medium-density residential on 5.74 acres of property identified by Brevard County, parcel ID numbers 22-35-09-3-*21.02 and 22-35-09-03-**21.03 as described in Exhibit A of the ordinance. This ordinance is a legislative item. Staff recommends denial of the rezoning from the single-family medium-density R1B to the multifamily high-density residential R3 zoning designation. As an alternative, staff recommends approval of rezoning from the R1B to the multifamily medium-density R2 zoning district with the updated concept plan noting the minimum lot width of 24 feet consistent with the small-scale amendment. This ordinance is a quasi-judicial item. A public hearing on this item will be held by City Council on March 11th. And I'd be happy to provide any answers to your questions if you have any from staff at this time.
Thank you. Does anyone on the dais have any questions? Member Grod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I took the opportunity this week to speak to staff about the analysis on this particular amendment, on the small-scale amendment. And to make it brief for explaining my opinion, what at the last part of the conclusion of the staff's report, what's important to recognize is that you're driving the compliance with a comprehensive future land use designation by the chosen width of a townhouse. That's a little odd in terms of, typically speaking, you have zoning district regulations on the one hand and land use much broader, much longer range on the other hand. The first blush request is that longer range plan. The denial of the zoning district is because the zoning district doesn't permit a 20-foot wide townhouse lot, but the site plan that's binding, so to speak, a contract, is compliant with the future land use as well as the requested zoning. So I kind of queried about how much reliance can you make on that binding plan. Certainly, you can't exhaust a zoning district because you change the binding plan. But for Chelsea, perhaps the question is, how much conditional approval can you make that the binding plan is the maximum allowable units on the land, which is really the issue, not the width. Again, you're at a mile-high observation on a land use designation request, and you're focusing on a footprint of a toe at the ground. And that's just a little different than typically you do. So if the applicant's binding plan is so binding as to not allow it to be developed otherwise, and that binding plan is compliant with the request for the future application of the zoning, I think the land use should be looked at more purely speaking, not confused or possibly amplified by the binding plan showing a 20-foot product or a 21-foot or up to 24. So that was just to let the commissioners know that, you know, this request, in my opinion, is about the future land use designation. We may be getting, as I referred to it, we may be having the cart pulling the horse in the sense of the zoning district, moreover, the site plan, more specifically the 20-foot wide product, is dragging the horse. And that's not usually the way it works. The horse pulls the cart. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm going to discuss that possibly with Mr. Honeycutt's presentation as well.
Member Faison?
I understand your point, Member Garrett, but if I'm, and again, I may say this wrong, so please bear with me, but don't we have where we don't want to mix too much or have a growth where we go from R1 to R3 arbitrarily? We want to make sure that there's a steady progress from R1 to R2 and then R3. I believe we had that conversation before where we don't want to mix them too much. We want to have that gradual progression. Am I right? Am I mistaking this, Eddie? Or I'm sorry.
I'm kind of confused by the question, if you could just reiterate it.
All right, so the question that I have before is, I believe we've talked before about when someone wants to change the land use designation, that if there's an R1, we don't just want to just put an R3 right next to it unless there's something around there that's kind of similar. But we do want to gradually step up to an R2.
Yes, typically those higher density residential zoning districts are acting as buffers.
Correct.
So, you know, you have a single family residential, which gradually would grow into a medium, which would, you know, gradually grow into a high.
Correct.
So typically that's the best practice.
So there was a question about consistency with the existing single-family residential surrounding the property. And the question is, if the applicant is willing to bind their site, allowing the R3, but bind it to a number of units that would actually be within the realm of the R2 district, as long as what we all understand as binding, meaning they would have to rezone it if they wanted to go above the number of units that are approved tonight. And so that would help to keep the consistency with the neighborhood, even though the districts on the face of it would seem a little more intense compared to the surrounding.
Right.
The zoning ordinance would have a copy of the binding concept plan and would be enforceable.
Because the reason why I bring that up is I wouldn't want to set a precedence of where there was an R1 here this time and someplace else they said, well, you did an R3 over there, why can't we do an R3 over here? And then, you know, have a greater number of units. And so that's the reason why I brought that up. I mean, I understand your point where there's a 20-foot versus 24-foot footprint here, but the longevity of that choice of leaving it as an R3 would set a precedence later on that could be exploited.
Member Garrett?
To try to respond to that question, and that's a really good question. When I spoke to staff, I mentioned that most likely in a different scenario, the type of zoning requests would be made would be for a planned unit development or a planned development where that is a contract, that is binding, it is the plan, it is the zoning, it's all the rules, all in one basket, as opposed to generic basket, the zoning district. I mentioned that it's odd that you regulate growth by such things as lot area and lot width and building height. You regulate it by size of dwellings. We have many debates about the size of a dwelling. Does it make it affordable if it's smaller? Does it make it exclude affordability if it's too large? Size of houses, that is, to me, akin to looking at this for a lot width standard, as in a subdivision regulation, as zoning standard applied to a attached dwelling unit. And to me, that's getting into such minutia that it probably is not the best practice for regulating zoning districts when you're applying it to something like a townhouse lot. In a single-family detached housing type of development where those zoning districts are more typically seen, a minimum lot width is considerable because you have to put the product of the gross square feet of a house on it. But imagine if a zoning district were to say, your house has to be 16 feet wide, so we won't grant the zoning because your house is going to be 15 feet wide. That's just a little bit too focused on a standard for development when you look at it applied to a townhouse development. So that was another issue I had. In a perfect world, it'd be a planned development request and we wouldn't have the conflict. And I also want to stress that one of the matters I also want to discuss is in the report, it indicates that if we did this, then what the applicant can do is defer to the Board of Adjustment seeking a variance from the development standard. But the hardship is self-sought. You ask for the zoning change. You've asked something to be changed and you aren't compliant with it. That doesn't ring to me too true of a hardship. And it also tends to question in the development review process, this board makes recommendations on land use. It makes recommendations on zoning districts to the final decision-making of the city council. But in this case, the final decision is going to be the Board of Adjustment if it follows the suit led that you grant this, but it's deficient, just go seek a variance. And I have a real inherent issue with that. It's kicking the can down the road, so to speak. And I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, it does, but it still leaves open the option to be a planned development. So so they don't have to request a variance. They can change it to be a planned development, and none of this will be an issue.
Certainly, Mr. Honeycutt's going to be here to talk about stuff like that.
Member Rogers?
I was a little distracted here for a second, but I just want to be sure I understood this. So the revised plan for 32 townhomes is not a binding plan?
The revised plan provided would be binding if approved. And the only way to have it amended would be to come back to you to have a rezoning, to amend the concept plan.
Okay. And we looked at this at some point earlier, and it has come back. Originally, we were talking about 43 homes, townhomes, correct?
That's correct.
Although I saw 45 mentioned somewhere, but.
Yes, so there, in the original request, there was 45 units. At the meeting, the applicant provided an updated concept plan at the planning and zoning meeting, reducing the number of units.
Right.
And then the Planning and Zoning Commission made a decision at that meeting, and then when it was presented at council, the applicant provided another revised concept plan, further reducing the number of units.
Okay. And were you there at that meeting?
At the
At this original meeting for this particular property?
the Planning and Zoning Commission, yes, I was.
Okay. I just, what I recall is some neighbors came and spoke, and they certainly were not enthusiastic about 43 units. I think that's what I remember, but it's been a while. But there was a reference to a sort of a local meeting, with neighbors and things in the documents, but I didn't see that listed. Was there, did I miss that somewhere?
Yes, it was held, and I have the date here on the report. Just bear with me.
But were any comments included in the packet?
No, there was not.
So again, I'm kind of new, but is it typical?
Those are not typically provided
Not
with the
typically
packets,
provided.
no.
Okay.
The public engagement meeting was held on March 21st, 2024.
And you don't have any details on
I do not.
the gist of it?
The applicants could certainly speak to their experience.
Noted.
One quick question for staff. Under the R1 zoning, what would the number of units be that could be put on this property if it's stayed R1?
I believe they would, according to the density, have a maximum of 28 single-family residential detached units.
All right, thank you. Anything else? All right, I'll open the public hearing and let the applicant speak first.
Washington Avenue in Titusville. And so, as we've heard, we were here a few months ago, and we were requesting, I think, 43 units at that meeting. It had been revised from the original application due to, I think, a landscape track is required around the entire unit, so reduced it some. And so before the P&Z meeting, just before it, staff made us aware that there's a compatibility table in the code, and R3 zoning and medium-density residential are not compatible. So therefore, we agreed to change it to R2 because we're not looking for a higher density. And so that's how we ended up with the concept you currently have in your packet. I believe it's on page 12. And so that plan has been revised to meet R2 zoning. And the maximum numbers we said is 32 units. That's just a little over 5 units per acre, which is allowed in the low-density residential. It's about 5.6 units per acre. And so the reason we're here is over a year ago, my client decided that townhome, single-family units are more affordable and currently a better answer than single-family for this area. And so he actually picked out a townhome that he liked. It was 20 feet wide. He came in the office, we looked at it, and we said, well, the only way you can do that is, R3 zone or a PUD, and a PUD with the existing road and everything, and didn't seem like a good way to go. In addition to complying with the R2 zoning, when we revised the plan, if you look at it, we tried to make it more compatible. The units on the north side, which back up to single family, they're only 2 units together. So the structure is about the same size as a single family home instead of having larger structures there. It makes it more compatible, we felt. And on the east side, there's only one building with 3 units. On the south side, it's buffered by a stormwater pond and a road, so that's where the balance of the units. So that's the way we've ended up. Actually, on the north side, a single-family subdivision would have the same number of structures as we have now, and that's kind of why we did it like that. We feel that this design fits the neighborhood, and we will understand that per the code, we'll design this to be compatible with the neighborhood, such as architectural design, landscaping, and screening. And so staff has recommended approval of the R2 zoning for our concept plan and the medium density residential, and we're requesting that you do the same. And so if you have any questions, let me know.
Member Childs?
You said on the north side, you said that the single-family homes that abut the north side would be the same amount of,
The same amount of structures.
same amount of structures, so in the same kind of area, it'd be the same amount as if you built single-family homes, right? Or the single-family homes that are built just north of it, that's what you're saying?
So to be more specific, around 2000, probably 8, a preliminary plat was approved and engineering plans, and there were 7 homes on the north that face the north boundary. And now there are 7 structures, albeit duplex. So, and these structures are like 50 by 55, so they're 2,500 square feet on the, the footprint, so it's about the same. That was kind of the goal, to be for compatibility.
Okay, I see, thank you.
Member Grod?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Honeycutt, in the acceptance to the staff's recommendation for the R2 zoning, recognizing that your product design is deficient to the minimum standard, and as the staff report goes, you'll have to secure a variance by the Board of Adjustment. That's my understanding, correct?
No, I don't. If we're not compatible, we'll make it compatible. I don't think there is a variance required.
So if the R2 is approved, in order to get a minimum 20-foot wide width lot in the R2, a variance would be required.
So as I
We're
mentioned,
not going to ask for that, no.
so if you go with the flow, you're going to build a 24-foot minimum width product.
Except on the ends, they could be 20, but yeah.
It still means
The
you have to.
middle units all have to be 24 feet wide. The unit itself don't necessarily have to be 24 feet.
It'd be
That's
simpler
correct.
if I asked the question, your product design will be conforming to the minimum lot width of the R2 zoning?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that first preamble I gave didn't work out because I thought that was putting you in a bind accepting a zoning you
No,
couldn't design to.
we wouldn't, we're not going for any variances.
Good, thank you.
Member Faison?
Hey, Mr. Honeycutt, how you doing?
Hello, how you doing, Mr.
Good,
President?
man. Hey, just 2 questions for you. Are you guys going to be pulling in utilities into this area? Or are you just going to tap off of the main, off of Varna?
All utilities and road and stormwater is already existing on this site.
Okay,
When they originally got those final plans for the single family that I talked about, they actually constructed everything, but they didn't record the final plat, the economy and some other reasons.
got it. And then the other question I have is that the neighbors that did show up last time had concerns about flooding. And you guys are going to address that to make sure there's no water runoff, because that is a downhill slope to the road that's to your rear, to the east. So you guys will make sure that there'll be no water running, any, runoff into those neighborhoods, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Member Rogers?
Mr. Honeycutt, you said it would be, I don't know, you didn't want to go in the direction of a PUD. It didn't look like that would work or something. Just curious about why that is.
We just didn't feel that was the best way to go with everything that was already installed.
Okay. And I just was, I guess we all drive down Barna sometimes, and I've seen the property. It's got a lot of really lovely big oak trees on it. Do you know, with the current layout that you've proposed, whether some of them will be able to be saved?
Well, all I can tell you is I think so. There's not any heritage trees. I think there's one specimen tree,
Okay.
and it's a pine tree, which are difficult to save sometimes.
Okay. And the last question, which is just kind of curiosity, because this is your business and I think has been for all of your life. I agreed certainly with what Mr. Garrod said about this kind of odd fixation on making homes a certain size, making them big enough to qualify for a certain size. And I understand that builders and developers don't make much money or enough money or maybe any money on smaller homes. But are you aware of, I don't know, anybody who's building 900,000, 1,200 square foot homes and making money at it? And how that, is there, how they're doing it?
I'm sure they're making money or they wouldn't be building the homes, but no, that's not my area of home construction.
Well, thank you, sir.
All right. Anyone? Don't see any more lights? Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori, you have cards?
Yes. Ken Miller.
Good evening. I'm Ken Miller. I live here in Titusville, and I'm the owner of this project that we're just discussing here. And I'd just like to make one correction here, or ask a question. Did you just mention 900 square feet homes if the builder could make money on a 900?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I
think
did.
these designed units were designed to be 900 per floor, not necessarily total 900. And because it's 2 floors, the approximate living area in these units will be about 1,600 square feet.
It's Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Miller, yeah, it's just that we have spoken numerous times here in this group about trying to find a way to have smaller homes. I know this is not for your property now. I was just curious about, something that's smaller, that's more affordable, that's just a 1-bedroom, 1-bath type thing that like they used to build a long time ago. But it seems like most houses now are 3,000 square feet or more. And I take your point, though. I think you're right about the townhome being, a little smaller and maybe a better market right now.
I'm making myself available for any questions. If not, Mr. Honeycutt has made a very good explanation of what we're trying to accomplish on that subdivision.
Great, thank you.
James Troutman.
James Troutman, 1705 Barna Avenue. As we evaluate this request, we must consider the long-term impact on our community infrastructure and adherence to the city's established land use policies. The applicant seeks to change the land use designation. Right now, the Planning and Zoning Commission initially denied this request, citing future land use element policy 1.1.4. Since then, the applicant has revised their plan to align with the staff recommended multifamily medium density designation, reducing the total number of townhome units to 32. However, this request still contradicts key policies of the comprehensive plan, particularly policies 1.1.3, 1.1.4, which are in place to ensure responsible growth and land use consistencies. Policies 1.1.3 explicitly states that land use amendments should not disrupt established neighborhoods, ensuring that density transitions are appropriate and compatible. The proposed amendment undermines this by shifting from single-family zoning to multifamily zoning, introducing a density level that is inconsistent with the surrounding area and the original intent of the future land use map. Additionally, policy 1.1.4 reinforces the importance of maintaining stability and compatibility in land use decisions by requiring substantial justification for changes that increase density. The Planning and Zoning Commission previously denied this request based on that 1.1.4, as the applicant has not demonstrated a compelling reason why the property cannot remain within the existing zoning parameters. Staff's own analysis under the rezoning review section, specifically bullet point 7, states the existing zoning would allow, states that the existing zoning would allow a maximum of 28 single-family residences. There are no substantial reasons why the property cannot be used within the existing zoning. I would ask that should this commission choose to approve the amendment in rezoning, I strongly urge the inclusion of a stipulation requiring the builder or property owner to construct a privacy barrier, whether in the form of a fence, natural shrubs, or trees. I understand that there's a 20-foot landscape track. However, I request that the concept plan shows, if they choose to do shrubbery or anything of that nature, to show what the shrubbery or trees would be. And then I would ask that that would be 100% Brevard native. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question for him. I had a question for you. I understand that, 4 units, right? 24 to from 24 to 20 is 4 units. Got a little math question for you. Are you okay with math?
28 to 32, yeah.
Yeah, I
different.
got a question for
So we're
you.
different to 4 units here.
All right, so let's say these units are sold for 125 apiece, all right? If he was missing 4, how much would that be?
That'd be 500 grand.
It's a lot of money to be missing, right?
Yep,
I think I'd give him the 4 units. Thank you.
yep.
Teresa Bazillion.
Hello. Teresa Bazillion, 1845 Fairlane Drive. I did attend the initial community engagement a year ago. I have come to the planning board and also one of the city hall. Some of this is a repeat for you. Right now, there are 2 parcels in this area. So when you look at 5 units per acre, the Majestic Court is on 3.83 acres. The rest is that drainage ditch, and it's where all the water lines go. I can't see somebody putting a home on top of water lines. So on the 3.8, that's going to be 19 tops. The original approval in 2008 was for 16 homes. That would be in keeping. When I look at R3, I looked at all of Barna from Route 50 up to Park. I have found Royal Oaks, which are also single height, single story. And then there's one, the Villas El Concito. That is 2 stories. It is set back quite a bit from the road, but the rest of the property is a paved parking lot, which means there we're going to get into runoffs potentially. That was my concern initially when we were looking at a lot more units. The heritage trees, right now, when they put that line, the water lines in and they put the cul-de-sac in, those trees weren't touched. I would love to see them kept. I'm hoping that was factored in with the 16 buildings. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Anyone?
Kay St. Ange.
Yes, Kay St. Ange, Maryland Avenue. After your recommendation of denial on December 24th, the applicant came to council's second hearing, January 14th, bringing with him a different concept plan than was in council's agenda packet and different than what had been presented to you on December 4th. The public had not had a chance to review this revised concept plan, and that's why it's before you again tonight. SSA is still asking for amendment of the same future land use that was asked for on December 4th. I've been attending all these meetings too, and have been very interested in this project. When I got home, I used to be a professional transcriber, so when I got home from that council second meeting on January the 14th, I transcribed the part that was this discussion, and I transcribed Sarah Stokel's words. She said, "I don't think it's compatible. I agree with planning and zoning in the future land use policy 1.1.4, but also if you look at the policy 1.1.3, the city shall promote single-family development and redevelopment by restricting the proliferation of multifamily development within neighborhoods." She also said, "I don't think the concept plan will change the planning and zoning's reasoning for this land use." Okay, here's my thing. This landowner bought this with this zoning and this land use designation on it. It's like if you buy a Volkswagen, why do all of a sudden you think it should be a Cadillac? I just don't see it. These people bought their homes and knew what that land was next to them. It was zoned single family. They bought their homes knowing that. So why now should it be changed? I just don't understand it. And In fact, Sarah Stokel agrees with me. Again, no substantial change has occurred in this area since the original zoning for single-family. The density of this proposed two-story townhome complex is not consistent with this single-family neighborhood with its large lots of 2.27 acres, 1.91 acres, and 0.48 acres. There is no reason why the property cannot be developed with current single-family rezoning. And as well, the tree canopy requirements must be applied. 25% of the development area must be in tree canopy. So what he's saying about the heritage trees or whatever trees, the city staff will make sure that 25% of it will be in tree canopy. So the applicant has been a developer for a long time, Mr. Honeycutt, and I don't understand why he doesn't understand the ins and outs of this a little bit better. So it baffles me that he would come and at the second reading provide a new concept plan and didn't know the difference between R3 and R2. So I would ask that you continue to deny rezoning for the various reasons already suggested. Thank you.
No more cards.
Does the applicant have any rebuttal?
Just two things, and I might have been guilty of this too. These are single-family units. They're duplex, and then there's a triplex and a quadplex, and one building with six. She said there were, we're not doing single-family. They are single-family. It's not detached single-family. That's the difference. And as far as this be a seasoned developer, Mr. Miller's just tried to develop this property in 2009, and now he's trying again. So that's not my definition of a seasoned developer. Any question?
Member Garad.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Honeycutt, when you say triplexes and duplexes, are they single-story as well as being?
They're all two-story.
They're all two-story. Thank you.
Member Faison.
I remember when I grew up here, so I remember when Vieira was a cow pasture. And it was a cow pasture for a very long time. Then somebody bought that land. Then they developed that land. And now we have our county offices out on that land. And the people bought homes around there, and now there's a golf course and a baseball stadium. But it was once a cow pasture. So when someone buys the land, as long as it's compatible with the surrounding areas, I think a landowner has the right to request to change it to be what they want it to be. And so far, it's just a request.
Thank you. Member Garad.
This question really for staff. In the small-scale amendment before us, and then the related zoning, which now I understand to be the R2 instead of the R3, and then the binding concept plan, which works like a plan development because binding is binding. You mentioned that if you were to alter that plan, you would have to change the zoning. So is that understanding correct?
That's correct. So if they were to increase the number of units for the proposed project, that would be considered a substantial modification, which would require that item to come back to you as a rezoning request to amend the concept plan.
Sure. And as an example of maintaining tree canopies, if you moved a building slightly to maintain a tree, that would not be a substantial change.
That would be correct.
And to the extent what was presented is the vacancy of the property for a number of years that has, as I saw it, just happened to be going down Barna, there's a chain link, a chain across the entrance, which obviously can be a hazard if it was at night. I don't think you'd see it. So I looked at this from the background information that this is almost effectively an infill request where, because of circumstances, and the members of the commission have had a lot of discussion on what happens when you have infill requests, you're trying to achieve something. What this appears to me to be trying to merge a traditional residential neighborhood in the case of residential occupancy in single-family homes, albeit attached, as the neighborhood is. It's not a high-rise apartment complex. It's a single-family neighborhood, the number of units you mentioned are essentially the same as budding properties by numerical value. And the infill capacity is to make it more flexible, falls in line with affordability. And that's kind of why your analysis came about for the support of the SSA and the rezoning as an infill kind of view?
Yes, it is surrounded by existing development currently.
Thank you.
Member Faison.
Member Grott brought something to my remembrance about infill neighborhoods that were already 80% built out. What was that regulation? What was that? Did you guys present it to us a few weeks ago?
Yes, I believe that there is a current ordinance that has been drafted that is regarding the infill properties in the missing middle.
Correct. And I think that allowed for something and it reduced the requirements or, again, what did that propose? And I do apologize. Remember, I brought to my memory just now. I remember that it allowed for something and it reduced the requirements to allow that land to be used in this very fashion, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe it was primarily the reduction of the buffer requirement because the smaller properties, I believe it was properties 2 acres and
Yes,
under.
it is.
Okay.
2 acres and
2 acres and
smaller.
under.
Where
It
this would
doesn't
apply.
affect this property.
Okay. I'm trying to help you, sir.
All right, anyone
Okay.
else?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional action from the dais? Any of the members? Member Faison?
Ready to make a recommendation?
What do you say?
All righty. I'm ready to make a recommendation. Is that where we're at?
Oh,
Um,
wild looking.
I think Vice Chairman Childs might have a discussion point first.
All right. Yeah, I remember the last time we came here, and then I also watched the city council meeting about this too, and I believe I was the one who suggested denial or made the motion for denial. I mean, it doesn't, like it didn't seem to fit the neighborhood before, and I think the concept plan still. It does, and I like his, Mr. Honeycutt's, observation of the housing around it, the same structures. I mean, these are split, but if you have one building, I get that, but it's also 2 stories. I still think it doesn't seem to fit the area, but that's my opinion.
Member Rogers?
I was just going to say that a mention was made that at some point they said that there was high-density residential in the neighborhood, and I thought, well, yeah, I guess it depends on how you define the neighborhood, but it's a long way away. But there certainly is medium density, and a whole bunch of it just one street away. This is sitting in a sea of gray here on page 44. Yeah, it is all low-density residential, but it is one hopscotch from that big chunk of medium density between Queen and De Leon and Day Street. And anyway, so I feel that it is maybe a little more in keeping with the scale of the neighborhood than a member child seems to feel. That's my 2 cents, and I'm not voting.
Member Grodd?
A question for staff. Does the requested R2 zoning and the adjacent, is it R1B, the adjacent properties,
Yes, that's correct.
are they the same maximum height?
I'm not exactly sure, but they are all single-family residential homes within that zoning district, which I believe would have a maximum.
2 stories?
Yeah, a maximum of 2 stories regardless,
The
so.
reason I ask, and I appreciate Mr. Child's comment, and that's the tough nut to crack with infill, because where in my neighborhood I came back to, there's a number of examples, sometimes I'm amazed by it. People have renovated single-family, 1-story homes and stuck a second floor on them. I can probably say I could count 4 of them between the high school and going south down Hopkins and all those streets in between which, and as people do that, they do it for good reason. A 1957 home that's 1,000 square feet isn't big enough. And you can't make it bigger, a better way than to go to the second floor. So the zoning district, which is kind of a envelope, so to speak, provides effectively the property owners in the adjacent zoning district the full right to have a two-story building. As much as this is a proposal of 2 stories, that was one of the reasons I asked about duplexes and triplexes. They're more typically, and at least the ones I've observed, to be single-family homes. So duplex, it's a 1-story building. When you get to 2-story, it's kind of a townhouse attached. But it could be a duplex, 2 units attached as opposed to 3 or 4. So main point of this is the maximum building height of the adjacent zoning as well as the applicant's request is the same, 2 stories.
I just checked, and the adjacent single-family residential zoning has a maximum height of 35 feet, which is the same as the R2 zoning district.
Thank you.
All right, Member Faison, I think we're ready for you to go.
Well, I was just going to add to the conversation here. Primarily, this is an infill lot. And we're talking 4 units. So if you look at the diagram, the proposed diagram, and if you subtract 4 units, it doesn't change what's being built very much. So I don't see how leaving it low density really lessens the impact of what they're requesting already. Now I can see if they were asking for 35 homes and low density only allows 10, that's a huge impact. But from what they're asking for and what is currently there, we're talking 4 units. It has 3 in the corner. Take those out, it doesn't change anything. Take another unit off one of the ends, it doesn't change anything. So the impact is still there. It doesn't. That's just my opinion. Does anybody have a difference of opinion? If not, we'll move forward. All right, so I recommend approval of SSA 82024-1717 Barn Avenue, Royal Manor Townhomes. The change of it from low density to an R2 medium density.
Second.
I would like to do the future land use first.
Oh. I got my glasses on.
Page 14.
Thank you, because I sure can't see nothing. All righty, let's change I apologize, everyone. Recommend the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment. I recommend approval of the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment number 8-2024-1717 Barna Avenue, Royal Manor Townhomes.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Member Scully,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Childs,
No.
Member Gillen,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes?
Chairman Aton.
Yes. All right.
And now, before we move on, if Member Childs could just articulate his basis for the no vote?
I don't think it fits with the future land use area.
Okay. Member Faison, you want to take on part 2?
Yes, 1 second, please.
I think this is what you want.
He's gonna help me out, make it bigger for me because I can't see.
His glasses and I did.
Yeah. Team effort, guys, team effort. All right, so I recommend approval of the comprehensive plan future land use of, again, SSA 2024-1717 Royal Manor Townhomes, excuse me.
Second.
I'm sorry, did I hear a zoning? I heard you say land use.
We're trying to find your zoning.
Yeah, it's in the bold print on page, page
I apologize, guys, I don't have my glasses. We're working here.
Scroll through. 14?
I think,
Can staff help us with where?
Can you say R2 or R3?
yeah.
R2.
R2.
We recommend R2.
There you go.
With a amended concept plan, any other words you want to add?
We're going to get there.
Did we discuss amended, Carl? We didn't, I missed that, discuss that part. There we go, all righty. Recommend approval of the rezoning with the concept plan from the single-family medium-density R1B to the medium R2 zoning district consistent with a small-scale amendment
And the binding concept plan?
and the binding concept plan, correct?
And do we need anything about the 24 versus 20 thing in there?
Just as clarification, that the R2 zoning district will require a minimum lot width of 24 feet. Just make that clarification.
So stated.
Are we good, Chelsea?
I understand that the motion is for approval of the R2 zoning for this project and that it requires a concept plan to be redesigned with the 24-foot wide property width. That's what the motion should be.
And so stated.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Got a second? Member Snelling. Any comments? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Childs,
Yes.
Member Scully,
Yes.
Member Garrett,
Yes.
Member Gillen,
Yes.
Chairman Aton.
Yes. Congratulations, thank you, and this would be heard by council on the 11th, was that you said?
That's correct, sir, March 11th.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, SSA number 11-2024 on Columbia Boulevard.
Yes, sir. Small-scale comprehensive plan amendment number 11, 2024 begins on page 63 of 140 of tonight's packet. Before we begin, I just want to remind the commission that this item had been on a previous agenda for you all as SSA number 5, 2024. And the applicant withdrew that request mostly because of staff not supporting approval. At the time, the applicant was requesting the same future land use as tonight, the commercial high intensity, but the zoning district request was different. And in the previous request, the requested zoning district was RC, regional commercial, which staff could not support because of the locational criteria. It needed to be a certain distance away from an intersection of arterial streets, and the property didn't meet that. So tonight's request is again for the commercial high intensity future land use and the rezoning to community commercial, CC, which does not have the locational criteria that the regional commercial has. And also the difference in the application is that the previous request was included a concept plan for a specific use, a mini warehouse use, which would have been permitted in regional commercial. That use is not permitted in tonight's requested community commercial zoning district, and so there is no concept plan, and that use would not be permitted in that zoning district. So tonight's request is just to the CC zoning district at large. The applicant is requesting small-scale comprehensive plan amendment with rezoning to provide for a consistent commercial zoning district based on the existing and anticipated development patterns for the proposed area. The property is located on Columbia Boulevard between Cheney Highway and Kirkwood Trail, generally located southeast of Walmart at 3175 Cheney Highway. The current low-density residential future land use designation and single-family medium-density R1B zoning district do not permit commercial uses. The property was annexed into the city in 1985 and was originally zoned R1D, single-family medium-density. During the citywide rezoning of 1993, the subject property and the surrounding area was rezoned to R1B, single-family medium-density. It's not an error. R1D and R1B were both titled the same, but they were different zoning districts. I had that question. The property is currently vacant and is physically separated from the surrounding single-family residential subdivision by a drainage easement to the west, a preservation tract to the north, and a retention tract to the southeast. There are wetlands on site, which appear to be part of a larger wetland located off-site to the north on the 3.06 acre preservation tract of the Cathedral Pines Plat. Developing single-family residences on the site, as permitted by the current zoning district, would most likely require access onto Columbia Boulevard, an arterial road. However, direct driveway access onto arterial streets is prohibited by the land development regulations. It is likely that the location along Columbia Boulevard has made the site undesirable for single-family residences. Commercial development continues to expand in the general area. The requested CC zoning district requires frontage on a collector or higher classification thoroughfare as described in the CC zoning district. The property has frontage on Columbia Boulevard, which is an arterial roadway. The applicant did not submit a concept plan with this request. Therefore, the analysis in the report considers the maximum allowable build-out scenario under the requested commercial high-intensity future land use designation and the community commercial CC zoning district. The commercial high-intensity future land use designation allows a maximum floor area ratio of 1.0. The subject property is 3.14 acres in size, which would yield a maximum gross floor area of 136,778 square feet. Wanted to point the commission to a couple of pages. The first is page 122. Give you a second to navigate to that. That's going to be the future land use map. On the left-hand side is the existing future land use map, and on the right is the proposed. And you'll notice that the red commercial high intensity is currently located on some adjacent properties, specifically to the southeast and southwest. And commercial low intensity is located directly south. And the low density residential is located generally north of the subject property. On the following page is the zoning. For consistency, the requested zoning again is CC. The property directly to the south is zoned CC. Southwest is also zoned CC. Directly to the southeast is neighborhood commercial, so the lighter, less intense commercial district. And then the surrounding properties to the north are R1B zoning. I think that's all I wanted to point out to you all. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. All right, Member Grodd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question. I received an email today, and other members may have received it from an Audubon Society member, talking in terms about species that may have been overlooked in the analysis that was provided initially. Is there any further analysis on species location, environmental considerations that occur after this would be approved, if it's approved, before development would turn spades of dirt?
No, so the required environmental report that was submitted with the application is the environmental assessment of the property.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, open the public hearing. Here we have applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is John Abion. I'm with Florida Engineering Group. We're the civil engineers representing the developer. We concur with staff's recommendation in amending the future land use to commercial high intensity and zoning to community commercial. Just a little bit of a background. We did have a request before for a self-storage facility. We had somebody who was interested in a self-storage facility. And we believe it's a good use in that area. There are a lot of, residential areas and the general area. But apparently, the regional commercial that we were requesting, that was the only zoning that allowed self-storage. It has a locational element that was an issue for us. Therefore, since staff did not support it, we decided we're not going to pursue it, So at this point, what my client likes to do is to go to community commercial. While we don't have a plan right now, my client likes to have probably more like a clinic, medical office in this area. But we cannot pursue this without having entitlement. If we go in and we don't have that, nobody's going to talk to us. So we felt that would be a good use for that particular area, but without really having the entitlement, nobody's going to meet with us. So with that, we felt that would be the proper approach. Now, going back to, I apologize, Commissioner, answering your question in terms of the environmental portion. While the city may not have any more, the St. John's would be involved with the zoning, and the St. John's would require actually a site meeting. That's part of their process. However, if there's anybody from, you mentioned Audubon Society, I'm not sure, we would love to talk to them and see what was missed, if there was anything missed, and proceed from there. So really, we don't want to miss anything for our purpose, for our, best interest. So we'll be more than happy to pursue any further communication with you and the Audubon Society, whoever talked to you from that end. With that, I'm mainly here for really answer any questions you may have. As Mr. Galando mentioned, really the trend is commercial in that area. The land development code anyway does not allow access to a residential development in this area. So really it makes sense that we move forward with what we're requesting. Adjacent to us, there is commercial high intensity, so we are consistent and compatible with surrounding areas. And there is a big buffer with the residential. There is a 2-acre tract there that buffers us from the residential. So with that, I respectfully ask you to approve our request, and I'm here for any question that you may have.
Member Garad.
A question for staff. Were you aware of the Audubon members' email? Did you receive a copy as well?
I was not.
If I can, I'll forward it to you, and then you can provide it to the applicant as a reference name. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I-
Member Rogers?
Member Garad, real quick. I'll be out of the office tomorrow, so if you send it tomorrow, could you send it to Brad? Thank you.
Member Rogers,
I
did you
did
have a question for the applicant?
I'm just trying to find this gentleman's name again. What is your name, sir?
First name Jean, like Jean, Jean. Last name Abion.
Abion.
Yeah.
Mr. Abion, I don't quite know how to ask this question, but what are the professional standards of the environmental surveying groups in general? Do you know what they're?
When you mention what's the standards, they have to comply basically with the state regulations,
Right.
local jurisdiction if they have any regulations, and with the federal government if they have a consultation area in that particular area. So they have to comply with all these requirements. So these are the standards.
Okay. Well, I found this curious, and is my information correct that that the two owners of Macon Industrial LLC, the owner of this property, are Jeffrey B. Fuqua, if that's pronounced correctly, and John Miklos or Miklos?
That's correct, yeah.
And it was John Miklos who signed the environmental document. He is the president of
Biotech.
That's
correct.
So the owner of the property who is going to be developing it did sign the approval of the environmental sort of approval, saying that there were no environmental issues with the property. Is that a common occurrence?
It depends if the consultant is a part owner. He's not the owner, he's part owner. He's not a full owner. He's part owner of this. But if a consultant, it happens, I'm not saying it's like every project you see it, obviously not. But if the consultant is part owner, yeah, it happens. Now, just so I know where you're going with it. If you're thinking conflict of interest, I can assure you that Biotech as a company has been here for decades. And if you check them, they probably have 50% of all environmental study within the Central Florida area.
I know they
it's
are
a very
big and
reputable
well-established,
company.
yes.
He's not going to do anything on a 3-acre to jeopardize his reputation. There are more people that will be involved when we start the site planning and the engineering. There will be more agencies involved, and these guys will have, and St. John's for sure will have somebody who's going to come in and look at the site, look at the wetland line, agree on the wetland line. So there are a lot of steps that takes place. And he's well known with these districts. He's not going to really jeopardize his reputation. And any of us, any of the consultant that we work, we're not going to jeopardize our consultant for missing something because it's going to be found.
Okay, I understand. It pulled me up short a little bit. What was included in the documents They did say that that area is number one, a wood stork nesting and foraging area. There was some implication that there was an eagle watch area there, or in the area. And then there were I had to look up what a consultation area was for snail kites, scrub jays, and the caracara. Can you explain that a little bit more, what a consultation area is?
I'm going to tell you, it's like, the consultation area is a federal requirement, okay? I believe EPA, somebody could correct me, but it is a federal requirement. They designate certain areas depending on the land use, the existing land use, the elevation of the property. They're saying this is a good habitat for this particular species. So that's not necessarily they're there, but it's a good habitat for it. So that's why they have to go in and check for it to make sure whether it is available, it's there, they find that species or not. If they don't, then they file a report that it's not there. So that's the consultation area. That is mainly a federal requirement. Beyond that, then obviously they have to comply with the state requirements and, for the flora and fauna. And that's wetland and species, endangered species. So they have to go through all these processes in order to get to the point where the agencies agree with them on that report.
Okay, thank you. That's a good answer. I was just, I do have an email here from the Matthew Hayden, who's the Space Coast Audubon representative. May I read this, or is that appropriate? It's nothing.
I don't know, does it need to be?
What's that?
Chelsea?
What are you going to be reading? How long, what is it about?
Oh, well, it was just,
It's up to the chair and the board, really, not me.
Sure, yeah.
it mostly says that maybe it would be good to have TEC review this SSA and rezoning request before P&Z makes a recommendation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Say that. It's good to have who review it?
There was just some question about whether the Titusville Environmental Commission might review the application before P&Z made a recommendation.
Here's my position on that. I think this is going through because you felt one of the owner may have a conflict of interest by presenting this. And that's okay if you have that feeling. We don't have an issue. We're not trying to hide anything, but we don't want to delay anymore to have more people reviewing it. It's going to be reviewed down the road. I'm just telling you, it's going to be reviewed. This is not a done deal. If the city doesn't have a process, St. John's do, and we're willing to kind of take extra steps just to put the board at ease or put the city at ease if that's the concern. But we'd rather move forward at this point with a vote, with the idea that, yes, there will be more reviews, there will be more agencies involved when we do the site planning. So knowing what I know, there are a lot of things that we have to do before really we get any approval at this point. This is mainly entitlement at this point.
Vice Chairman Childs?
Yeah, I was going to read the email, but that's basically what it said. It's a very short email. It just says that since they didn't find any species, that maybe we should send it to TEC. But I don't know that sending it to the Titusville Environmental Commission, that they'll find the species themselves. They don't go out and check. So I think the most they would do is say, well, that's the report we got. You can't require them to continue to go back and do it. So I don't see the need for, at least in that area, at least on this point that they make in the email. But I think you already did the report. If they're not there, they're not there. I mean, that's the requirement.
We followed your requirement.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
all we can do. We can't do more than that. So we followed your requirements.
Yeah, I think that's, I think it's reasonable. Thanks.
Member Faison?
Just to be clear, you're not building anything right now, correct?
No, we don't have a project. We're just entitling the site.
Thank
Member Garad?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To facilitate communication with the Audubon representative, I forwarded the email to Mr. Parrish and requested he forward the information of the author of that to you, and then they can get together and discuss his concerns with you.
No problem.
Thank
We'd
you.
love to do that.
Anyone else? Member Rogers?
I just had one more question. Will, what percentage of the property will need to be filled?
We don't have a plan right now, so I'm gonna be guessing at this point if I give you a number, but obviously, depending on the actual site plan, where the building, size of building, parking and so on, that would end up being when we do the site plan. I just don't wanna guess and throw a number for you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any cards?
Kay St. Ange.
Okay, St. Ange, Maryland Avenue, and I am an Audubon Society member. The environmental report of Biotech Consulting on page 114 of your packet points out that this site is a United States Florida Wildlife Service consultation area for endangered Everglades snail kites, threatened crested I hope I can say it right, caracaras, and vulnerable Florida scrub jays. According to the Biotech Consulting report, consultation areas indicate potential for listed species to occur and that additional review might be necessary to confirm or rule out presence of species, end of quote. But according to the report, the site is also located within the wood stork nesting colony foraging area. Wood storks are another threatened species as well. The environmental report recommends an additional gopher tortoise survey 9 days prior to construction. Gopher tortoises are a vulnerable species. Another thing environmental impact to be considered is that 50% of the site is wetland, part of a larger wetland. The Titusville Environmental Commission's role is to study the environmental impact of developments, but they have to, from what I understand, the review of them needs to be recommended to them. So I would suggest that P&Z recommend the review of this SSA rezoning application to the Titusville Environmental Commission. That is their role. I would say 90% of them are on the Audubon Society members. And as you know, Laura Lee Thompson, the vice chair, was the founder of the Bird and Wildlife Festival. That was the biggest bird festival in the United States. I don't know that it is so anymore because our birds keep dwindling, and so we're not getting as many tourists coming here to see them. That's why we need to protect all of these kites and caracaras and scrub jays and bald eagles and wood storks. These are our heritage. I don't know about you guys, but when a painted bunting comes to my feeder, it is a big deal to me. When I see a wood stork, when I see a caracara, a bald eagle flies over my house, it's a big deal to me. It brings in tourist money as well. These birds do. The trees on these sites do as well. So I suggest that you recommend that Titusville Environmental Commission have the opportunity to study the potential environmental impacts of this SSA and rezoning request.
Vice Chairman Giles.
Any questions?
So, yeah. So what do you think, so the email that was talked about, he was specifically talking about the species report, and that's why he thought it should go to TEC. But are you saying that there's other reasons why it should go to TEC to review, just in general, because there's a consultation area, or what? I guess what's the reasons?
Because it involves all these, 5 different species of birds that are threatened, vulnerable, or endangered, yes. And the Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has indicated that so. They wouldn't have made this a consultation area, that they indicate its potential for listed species to occur and would require additional review.
Because you're a member of the Audubon too, but do you know what kind of recommendation that the TEC would make? I mean, in general, I know you don't, you'd have to get into it, but do you know a general idea of what the TEC would recommend? I guess, as far as what they would investigate and do? I'm just
I
interested.
think that would be something you would want to ask staff. I'm not on the TEC, never have been on the TEC. Those are all my good friends, and if I join the TEC, I can't talk to them anymore. We can't get together. I can't have lunch with them, because that would be against sunshine law. So they're my friends. Yeah, that's why I can't be on these boards.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess you guys aren't all good buddies, like we are.
We hate each other,
But
actually.
I think they would recommend to you how to protect these to the best of your ability as a planning and zoning commission. How can you protect these species? They might be able to give you a little heads up. So, anyways,
Rod,
any other
question
questions?
for,
I
Yes,
did
and
have a
no.
question that may be more for the applicant, but you're also involved in the conversation.
Yeah.
And as well staff. There have been several reviews of changes in zoning or changes more particularly in comprehensive land use plan designations where more particularly wetlands were shown on a map that was a generalization done by adoption of a plan that utilized basic information that had been made available by the U.S. government that is proven to be fallible over time because the way in which they made those determinations weren't field truth. They hadn't been on the site. They hadn't conducted a survey. This consultation area, I'm looking in a pragmatic point. It's an enclave of woods. There's development all around it. So the first blush question I have is, I hate to reiterate carts and horses, was the consultation area designated before all the development of the houses around it, wherein it used to be part of much larger environmentally sound area, environmentally sound meaning it was natural, where foresting, habitat, and certainly likelihood of species being on site would have been in a much larger area, and then development occurred, leaving this enclave of a designated area, much akin to the same thing we've seen with wetlands maps, where adoption of this overlay designated area may have been, generally speaking, accurate at a time, but became inaccurate over time. Do you know, or does the applicant know, or does staff know? And if my question's unclear, I'll try to clarify it.
There is a lot of undeveloped land around there. For instance, it's not very far from the Enchanted Forest, and directly to the south, there's the Wendover Farms, which has,
I'm
and all that
familiar
area.
I'm
So there's-
familiar with the Enchanted Forest. That's a bit of a stretch, I think, to take it to
Well,
the
there's a
Enchanted
lot of,
Forest.
I looked at the aerial map, and there's a lot of undeveloped land around that area. But, I mean, if we just keep wheedling away at it, and if indeed, I mean, I assume the United States Fish and Wildlife Service has a valid reason to say that this is a consultation area for those three species and that there's a wood stork nesting colony foraging area. They designated it this. I mean, that's what TEC can do, is contact the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and ask them these questions on your behalf. Yes, and whoever determined that this was a wood stork nesting colony foraging area, they could ask them, indeed.
Yeah, I understand. The point I was making is that oftentimes federal designated areas based on geographic maps done at large scale can prove to be inaccurate. We've had many cases, I would say probably half a dozen, where amendments to known wetland designated areas were proven to not exist. They were not impacted areas, they simply were inaccurately mapped. I question which came first, the designation or the development around it, and I have no idea.
Well, and that's why we need the Titusville Environmental Committee to determine these things, to
And I'm-
study it.
I guess my point would also be that the applicant knows, as well as staff, that there's a tier of environmental development review that occurs at the state regulatory agency, of which interfaces with the federal regulatory agency through the St. John's Water Management District. So I would suspect if the TDC was to look at this, they'd almost have to hire a consultant to go prove ground truthing. Are there, in fact, wood storks nesting in the area, caracares nesting, scrub jays, or not, to make a decision if this needs to be recommended to the commission because they are in possession of the animals. bird species. That's the puzzling part to me.
Just think about it, though. Let's say that you have seen bobcats in your neighborhood, but they're not going to show themselves to you just because you went for a walk in the woods. They're going to run and hide. So these other things, it's not a matter of seeing them at a given time. It's a matter of, is this a viable habitat for them? And is there nesting facilities for them? Is it the wetlands? It is at 50% wetland. And so I just think that that's something that TEC, they have contacts with St. John's River Water Management. Laura Lee Thompson has, contacts with these people, and she will delve into it, and Michael Majek will delve into it, but you don't have that time or that ability that they do. That's why we have a Titusville Environmental Commission, is to delve into these things and study them, so that once you just, build whatever they plan on building there, it's too late. But we could study it now. We can take that time. And we're talking about quite a few species here, and they're endangered, vulnerable, or threatened by the U.S. government has determined that.
I understand your point of view.
so-
I guess my response would be, the applicant seeks to change a zoning district and a land use, as he called it, for entitlement. I call it marketability. But either way you look at it, it's the same. It's not developed based on what's being granted, and nor, I believe, is there any further endangerment than what the endangerment that exists today based on the current land use designation and the current zoning, as staff's report says, came about through a comprehensive rezoning of the city. So at some point, the city, the government, laid upon land a particular use and allowed that use to be compatible, allowed that use to comply with codes and all sundry stuff. That exists today on that land. It's not vacant, undevelopable. It's developable potential is what the zoning is in effect and the land use designation in effect. However, as in the current land use designation and the current zoning, or the applicant's requested change, both will have to go through an environmental assessment by the regulatory agency. I think and that's why I said the question's twofold. The applicant, you seem to know what you're referring to in the development review process. Could you maybe amplify that?
Okay, but can I say one thing?
Sure.
Why does planning and zoning get this environmental impact study by biotech if you're not to consider it? Why does staff require that you receive it? I'll let him answer it. Yes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you for allowing me to come back and clarify certain things. Commissioner, obviously, everything that was said is in our report. So we identified all these areas. And these are regulations that we have to comply with, We have done hundreds of sites that U.S. Fish and Wildlife designate, as consultation area for a specific species. We have to get an environmental, they go out there, they do their analysis, whatever they do in the field, they determine whether it's there or not. The way it designates it, as I mentioned previously, at least two of them, is based on the land use itself and the elevation of the property. Certain elevation, they have good habitat for certain species. That doesn't mean they're there. The report says potential for. It doesn't mean it's there. If they found it, they would have said it, okay? So the point I'm making, at one point when we go to site planning, and we have to kind of submit a report to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, say we did the U.S., and then we didn't find, or we did. If we do, then there are mitigating factors that we have to comply with, okay? So there is a whole process that we have to go with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, since it's a consultation area. But that doesn't mean anything in terms of the entitlement or the rezoning, because that comes down the road. And so from a process point of view is, the planning and zoning looking at the entitlement, you have other agencies going to be involved at one point, and they may limit our ability to develop the site. We may not be able to develop the entire site, or we may be. So that's something down the road when we start doing actual permitting with the different agencies. So we have to go back to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We have to go back to the St. John's. That's the process. I don't know what the Titusville Environmental Commission function is, but why have them getting into a permit that's really not necessary to begin with, other than we have to go to all these agencies to get a permit. Otherwise, we would not be able to get a permit. And so there is a process. All these agencies that just mentioned in the report, we have to get approval from them to say, yes, we agree or we disagree with you. And the St. John's obviously will have actual, I know for a fact they send an inspector to agree on the wetland line and look at it. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they could send or they could not send, but we will not send anything for the federal government. That's not true. It's not worth it for any consultant. All we have is our reputation at the end of the day. We don't really manufacture anything. So we have done this so many times. A lot of these sites have potential because it's designated by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but you don't find anything, and we send the report, and it's a done deal. Some of them we do find something, and then we have to deal with it. There are steps that you have to take, where you can deal for mitigating for any potential impact. Even in the report, if you notice, we have to make sure if there are gopher tortoises, we have to do a permit to kind of, remove them from the site. So this is comprehensive environmental report, and we provide you with a comprehensive, at least you are aware of what we have to deal with. Now, if we go back to the Land Development Code and the comp plan, the Land Development and the comp plan request an environmental report, but it also doesn't say you cannot, basically rezone or zone based on an environmental report that says you have a wetland. The only thing, and correct me, Eddie, in the land development, if you have a wetland contiguous over 5 acres, then it has to be conservation. It has to be designated as conservation. But this is less than 5 acres, so it could be rezoned. But when you rezone it and you want to develop it, then you have to go back to the St. John's. They may allow you to impact, they may not, and if they do, then you have mitigation. So there is a whole process that we have to go through, and all these environmental agencies are going to be involved. And the only reason I offered to talk to the Audubon person is just to remove the conflict of interest perception that was just brought up, that one of the owners is the owner of biotech. So we are willing to meet with them if that gives it more credibility, but that's really on our own, just to prove to this board that we have nothing to hide. We do that. I've been doing this for 35 years, so it's not, this is the hill I want to die on. No. We do everything correct. We do everything by code. We do everything by the Land Development Code. So I hope that explains it, and I hope you guys can look at it.
It answers my question. I guess I'm going to ask this for the commission's following my lead of my question. Entitlement is a similar word, as I said, to marketability. Sure. You're marketing the property.
Of course.
But right now, you currently have an entitled development potential. And in the same vein, if you follow the zoning rule in effect and the land use designation in effect, you'll have to go through an environmental permitting procedure to develop the land through the Water Management District, through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, because this is identified on the map as it is. So if you weren't here today and you were turning spades of dirt tomorrow on what you're entitled to do currently, there'd be no difference in what you're going to have to do when you change the land use and the zoning. The two stay the same.
Same steps.
And if you turn the dirt and the spade to dirt today, there is, staff's response to the question, is there an interface with the environmental committee based on the current zoning and current land use that would require the applicant to go to them before they develop the land?
No.
Thank you.
Member Rogers?
I just, on page 76, it says staff comment, a community engagement meeting was held by the applicant on November 26, 2024. What was the result of that meeting?
Nobody showed up.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, nobody showed up, so.
Noted.
And nobody's here, so I'm thinking this is good.
Okay.
All right. Seeing no other lights, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Close the public hearing. We have any more questions from the members? Vice Chairman Childs?
Question for Eddie. Eddie, is it true though, we only send certain things to TEC via recommendation from city council or P and Z? Or are there certain things that TEC gets regardless, though?
So to start, there's usually at least one member of the P and Z that also serves on the TEC.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. In the code, there are certain things like, I think in the past, we've had a conditional use permit for a gas station that was within the area of critical concern that had a requirement to go before TEC. So there are specific cases that are outlined. And then just in general, if the board would like the opinion of, finds that it's important to have the opinion of the Environmental Commission, it's difficult when the applications are advertised. So this meeting tonight has been advertised, the city council meeting has been advertised. And so just keep in mind that if you're trying to send this to TEC for input before you were to make a decision, that means that the application would go to city council without your recommendation, and you would prevent city council from making a decision because they would need your recommendation.
But there's certain things that do you guys, does staff recommend to go to TEC for certain things? Or do you guys just make that decision though sometimes, or is there a certain criteria that you guys follow?
Only where the code requires.
Okay, so in the code, there's certain requirements for it to go to TEC first, and this one didn't meet that, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Member Rogers.
But the thing is though, Eddie, I mean, if the TEC seeing it requires either us or the council to ask for them to review it, I mean, this only came up on the agenda, Thursday or something we got this? I mean, like, by then it's been advertised, right? I mean, like, there's not a way really. I mean, I don't know how you change that, but there's not really a way for the people who can call for the TEC to examine something to know that it's coming up. Am I right, or am I missing something?
Is there a way for the members of the TEC to know that this item is coming up?
Yeah, or for us to know that it's coming up, and so that, and I mean, I'm just saying that if it's already too late by the time we learn of it, and we have to tell the TEC, and we're the ones who have to, put the TEC on it to look at it. If I mean, like, it's impossible ever, with the exception of it's mandated, or I don't know, that it occurs to staff that this is something that maybe they should look at, unless I'm missing something.
The P and Z agendas are published, and so if the TEC members wanted to confirm what items were being heard by P and Z, they could follow up that way, or if there was a joint member of TEC on P and Z, that would be a really helpful way.
But they're only published like today's Wednesday, they're published maybe a week in advance, or,
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
All right. I don't see more lights. Anyone care to make a motion? Member Garad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make a motion to follow the staff's recommendation for small-scale amendment number 11-2024, amending the future land use, changing the current designation from low-density residential to commercial high-intensity.
I will second that.
Thank you. Member Faison, comment? Oh. Roll call, please.
Member Faison?
Yes.
Member Gillen?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Member Scully?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Childs?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Chairman Aton?
Yes. All right, and then we need a rezoning separately. Member Garad, you carry on? Part two?
I presume I can follow the suit. I do have it large enough in scale to read. Following the staff's recommendation as well after the hearing for approving the request to change the zoning from single-family medium-density R1B to community commercial CG on the property in question.
You have a second?
Second.
Member Grant, thank you. Roll call, please.
Member Gillen?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes?
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Childs?
Yes.
Member Faison?
Yes.
Member Scully?
Yes.
Chairman Aton?
Yes. Congratulations, passes unanimously. And that'll be heard by council, when, Eddie?
On March 25th.
March 25th. Thank you. All right. Third item on the agenda is the proposed amendments to the bylaws so we can understand when to make the Pledge of Allegiance. Who's, Chelsea, or is anybody explaining this one, or does it need explanation?
Minesweeper is a tense game.
I just wanted to clarify, Eddie said it was the 25th for the final approval, but it is going for first reading. The item we just heard is the first ordinance, first reading is next week, the 11th.
Okay.
Um,
You can reprimand Eddie later.
I just wanted to clarify. So the bylaws provide a procedural requirement that a proposed amendment must be suggested at one meeting and then present the actual changes in the bylaws at your next meeting, which would be today. And I was still at the SSA, sorry. As the item has been presented in your agenda, if there are no additional changes, then the board should make a motion to accept the proposed changes and modify the Planning and Zoning Commission bylaws. It would be appropriate to have a discussion if you have anything to discuss on this item.
Okay. Anyone have any appropriate discussion points?
It's a good idea.
I agree.
All right. The next step, I think, is a motion. Vice Chairman Childs.
I make a motion that we accept the new bylaws with the changes into the order of business.
I second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Member Scully,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes?
Vice Chairman Childs.
Yes.
Member Gallen,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Aton.
Yes. All right. Bylaws are amended. We can see the pledge on the next agenda. Thank you. I had to pencil it in this time just so I wouldn't forget it. All right. Second, petitions and requests from the public. I see no public present, so I'm assuming we're going to go that. City staff report,
No report, sir.
city attorney.
I can't think of anything. Thank you for approving the change to the bylaws.
It was a tough one. Any members have any reports? Member Rogers?
Well, I don't have a report. I just had a question to Eddie mostly. Is it too late? Yes.
Is it for the benefit of the commission? Otherwise,
It is,
Last Samurai.
yes. It was just that I feel like I've seen recently in the packets, a number of summaries or maybe even direct statements of the community meetings, the engagement meetings and stuff like that. And I find that helpful. But I guess obviously if there was no one there at this one, then okay, there's nothing to say. But is it not, I guess it's maybe not standard procedure. When does it get included and when does it not? Because I kind of like it.
sure, if that's helpful, we can try to add a little more context to it. We're just showing that they've met the minimum requirement by having the meeting. If you're interested in reading the full report that we receive, more than welcome to request it. Just contact our office.
You know, obviously, if like 20 people come and they say we love it, then that's great. The neighborhood doesn't have a problem. But if 20 people from the neighborhood come and say we hate it, then it's good to know, I think. You know, that's all.
Member Garad.
In line with my other comments on past meetings, keeping an eye on the legislature, there was again a broadcast made through the Thousand Friends of Florida, summarizing some new legislative intention. You may recall we discussed at a hearing a change from school board-owned property to some other land use and some other zoning. We had a fairly reasonable, robust discussion about that. The legislation, I believe it would include school board property governments. If I want to build affordable housing, no zoning rule, no land use is an impedance, I just build. No public notice, just go for it. You live next to the school one day, and then you live next to a high-rise apartment because it's profitable. It's a pretty interesting end of zoning rules as you know them, proposed legislation. So you may, if you get a chance, as I've recommended, it's a good resource. Take a look at it, read through the legislative language, and just an amazing relationship to where it's all going.
Thank you. Okay, my report is I have a family vacation next meeting, so Vice Chairman Childs will handle the gavel.
There's no gavel.
Well, I know, he could bang the mouse on the table or something. So,
Bring your own.
does anyone have anything else? If not, we stand adjourned.